Welcome to another episode of the TC4RE Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Alex, and I'm joined today by my co-host, Jeramie Sutton. Today, we are going to talk about allyship and what elements you need to measure to know whether or not you are a good ally. On this podcast, I'm joined by Julie Simpson, who is the CEO at ResourceiT, and Jeremy Haisman, who is a director at Protiviti. The term being an ally has gained popularity over recent years. And with the technology sector having a low percentage of ethnic minorities, we need to ask ourselves a question. Are we supporting these underrepresented groups in the right way? This is definitely going to be a special episode. So wherever you are, grab a pen and a notebook and enjoy the TC4RE Podcast. Hi guys, and welcome to another insert of the TC4RE Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Alex, and I am joined by Jel on this one. Jel, how are you doing?
Excellent, thanks. How are you doing?
Yeah, really good, thank you. It's been up to this point, the episodes we've put out have been really insightful and really helpful for a lot of our listeners, and I'm really looking forward to having this one recorded and then sharing that information with our listeners as well. Today on our podcast we have and I know they've got the same name, so I'm going to go for the shortened version. We've got Jez on the call and we've also got Julie. Hi guys, how are you guys doing?
I'm fine, great, Alex, great to be here.
Marvellous, thank you, Alex. Thank you very much for having us.
Good. Now, you may hear a familiar voice in Jez. That's because he was a co-host on a previous episode, so that's just a little plug-in for you guys to go and listen to that episode specifically. If you can point him out, maybe leave a comment and say, hey, look, it's the guy from the other one. But I wanted to start off with introductions to our two people who are joining us on this podcast, and then we'll go into the topic, which is around allyship and whether you think you're a good ally or if there's more you can do to be a better ally. So, Jez, do you want to give an introduction to our listeners?
Yeah, thanks, Alex. So, hi everyone. I'm Jeremy Haisman. I'm a director in a company called Protiviti, and also I'm a member of the TC4RE group.
Hi, I'm Julie Simpson. I'm the founder and CEO of ResourceiT. We're a channel marketing agency for the IT sector. And I'm also one of the founders of TC4RE.
Thanks, Julie, and great to have both you and Jez with us today talking about the topic of allyship. Now, on this podcast, we never like to assume that people know about the topics that we're discussing because they may be new to them, and often they're also new to us. So when it comes to allyship, we wanted to start with a definition of what that actually means. Now, the definition is allyship in the workplace means recognising the privilege that members of majority groups have in a professional context and using this privilege to aid in the dismantling of systems and processes that prevent colleagues from having equal opportunities. Now, bit of a mouthful, I will heartily admit that. But I think if we were to break that down, I think from a race perspective, I think it means if you are, from the BAME community, it's those white colleagues using the privilege they have in their workplace, whether they know they exist or not, to support you in being feeling embedded, welcomed, belonging in the culture that you're working, but also supporting you in the progression and development of your careers. Julie, it's a big topic, it's a big definition. I'd love by getting your view on your experiences and your thoughts on what allyship has meant for you and what it means as the CEO of your organisation of being a good ally in the organisation that you work in.
So thanks, Joe. Allyship, for me, it's kind of stopped me in my tracks a bit, if I'm honest. When I was involved with a Women in Technology group, I was a woman in technology. So I felt I could relate, I felt I could make a contribution, I felt I understood. As I've been involved in TC4RE that we've been working on together, I'm not Black, I'm not part of a minority ethnic community. So I really had to go and educate myself on what it was to be an ally. And the things I learned have really been, in some ways, quite shocking. In others, making me look at myself to think, have I always done the right thing? Probably not. And what could I do differently? So for me, allyship has been and continues to be a journey that I'm going on, and that because I'm doing it as the founder and CEO of ResourceiT, then I'm setting a standard of culture within my organization. And that's where the power comes of the influence, the things we can do differently. Because if the leaders don't understand, don't educate themselves, and don't actually drive change, then how can we hope for real change within our organizations? So, Jill, I think I don't profess to know everything about being a great ally. I try my best. I try to do the right thing. I try to educate myself. But I am sometimes wrong. And what I've learned is it's okay to be wrong. And it's okay to keep learning and to admit that. So, allyship it's a huge topic, and one that everybody needs to take really seriously.
And I really appreciate you saying that, and that everyone needs to take it seriously. But I also hope that, that people would recognise that we really mean it seriously when we say, you're right, people do get it wrong. And I think it's all about intent. And I think the fact that we have conversations like this of people asking, that felt a bit iffy sometimes. Was I okay to say that? Can I say that again? Why not, if that's not okay? Those are the conversations that I think are quite uncomfortable. But I think if we're going on that journey, and you as Julie as a leader in your organisation leading by example, it shows people that actually the fear is okay. We just got to kind of work through it together as a group, and that's where I think allyship becomes more natural. But there's no doubt about it, it's got to be a conscious effort to begin with, right? And a conscious effort from everybody to try, and also people from the BAME community to help you on that as well. Because the effort is what is great. Jez, what about you? What's your allyship journey been like?
It's a really good question, because if I'm being really honest, I think for me, I've only really come to terms with the phrase ally in the last couple of years. It's for me, it's not about just the workplace. It's about my life in general. It's how I act in an inclusive way for everyone, to help everyone work, rest, play. It doesn't matter. So I've always grown up with that mentality, where if I see discrimination of any kind, or non-inclusivity of any kind, there's something inside me that just makes me want to step in and make sure that I can take care of that, and make sure that is not something that is I want to see. So I think, when I first started hearing the frame ally, and it was the question that was raised in my head: am I an ally? What is a good ally? I think I'm a good ally, but am I really? So to Julie's point, it's like there's a little bit of fear in your own self to think, am I doing enough? What more can I do? I know what I stand for. I know what my moral code is, but is that enough really for everyone today? Work, rest, as I said, whatever it is. And I think some of the learnings, one of the reasons I joined TCare was very much to learn from other people about what more I could do to be part of and drive a form of allyship and a behavioural sense, a cultural sense that is transformative of where everyone in my world, I think, needs to get to. But I think one of the key elements for me was just listening to people about what it's like to be in their shoes. That was a real eye-opener for me, because I always allyship and everything, it's what I do. That's great, but actually, when you hear individuals that I've worked with and that are friends of mine, and you really sit down and have a conversation with them about this topic, or words that are associated with this topic, it's what they go through on a day-to-day about what it's like to be in their shoes. And then that was that was real kind of sit back in the chair moment. And I just remember thinking to myself, every day. Do you know what I mean? And that was something that was kind of really hit me quite a lot, because you think you know. And let's be clear, I come from a background of white privilege. I absolutely do. I have no idea what it's like to be in those shoes. And I think allyship as well is about learning what that is, the reality of that.
And I was just about to say that it sounds like you've done a lot of listening. Actually, you've tried to understand some of the experiences that people have that you weren't aware of, right? You didn't know that they were even a thing. And that learning step and wanting, I think, to hear about other people's experiences and why it's difficult is definitely, I think, the first step into becoming a good ally, because if you can't understand, you can't emphasize, right? And that's to do with anything. I guess following on from that really learning, inquisitive phase around kind of why is there an issue? Why do we need allies? Has there been anything in particular that you've gone beyond that learning, but in order to be a good ally? Anything really proactive that you've seen serve well?
For me, I think it's for me, it's really, I've gotten involved with a lot of extracurricular stuff outside of the workplace, which is really focused on helping everyone, and encourage, from a coaching perspective and sport perspective, all of those kinds of things that just make sure that those environments are really inclusive, whether it's cricket, football, all of those things, rugby, doesn't matter, gym. It's just really encouraging being part of and seeing and recognizing the talent in every individual, and making sure that they feel they're in a really safe place and environment so they can express themselves in the way that they want to express themselves, and not feel that they have to hold back a bit because they don't fit, or I don't look around and see everyone that's like me. Yeah,
great. How about you, Julie?
I think like Jez, I've been quite shocked at some of the things I've heard as I've started to ask questions of people that I know that are part of marginalised groups, even to like people that work for me that have been surprised when they've gone to an interview in the IT industry and been interviewed by a black person and been really surprised by that as a black person. They've come out of the interview saying, "You're never going to believe it, I got interviewed," and I'm like, "What? Why is that a surprise to you?" Like, yeah. Like, that has never happened. And I've really taken on board. So listening is one thing, understanding is another, but also acknowledging where we actually are in this industry and realizing that we have got some work to do. We face huge staff shortages in our technology businesses. We are, if we're not being inclusive, then that to me means we're being exclusive. So we're restricting ourselves, we're restricting our growth, we're restricting ourselves in terms of the commercial benefits in our organization. So I'm taking steps to make sure, there's this great phrase, you can't be what you can't see. So, Bernadette that works for me is black, and I really encourage her to be visible so that other people that may be from a minority ethnic background see Bernadette and think, I'm not going to be the only black person working at ResourceiT. So some of the steps I'm taking is to raise the visibility of underrepresented groups within my organization, just like I did with women in technology, right? We have this session called Promoting Your Inner Winners. If you want to attract more women to your organization, then get the women that you have got visible so that other women see that and then want to be part of that. And I've been consciously trying to do that with people from minority ethnic groups within my organization. The other thing that I'm really trying to do is, as Jez talked about, using my privilege. And privilege, as we know, isn't necessarily about wealth. It's about something that is given to you just because of something that you've inherited or you have, in my case being white. How can I use my privilege to give more of a voice and more visibility to people that don't have the same colour skin as me, that might be ignored or might be challenged? So I am actively taking steps to use my my status, my influence, my network, whatever I've got, to give visibility and voice to people that may be quieter because they're used to being marginalized, because they are maybe from a different background or culture. So I'm trying to learn how to be more intentional about inclusivity and forcing other people, and then to do that also. And then the final point I want to make was something else that Jez said about it's not just being at work. And I've said this a couple of times, like, if someone told a racist joke, what I may have done in the past is get angry about that, right? And challenging and really aggressive, like, don't say things like that, you can't, and start challenging and calling it out as racism, or that's actually maybe not what the person who isn't white or people that aren't white want you to do. And actually, when you aggressively attacking like that is not necessarily the right way. So what I'm and I got this advice from Belton Flournoy, actually, who's part of TCare. And he said to me, one of the things you can do when someone tells a racist joke and you are uncomfortable about that is ask them to repeat it. And often when people are challenged and think they've got to say something twice, they then perhaps realize that what they've said is not funny, because I often see racism disguised as humor, and that really winds me up. But getting angry about it isn't the way for me to share insight and get people to realize and recognize change. So, rather a long answer to your question, but I'm trying to be more intentional and more inclusive and understand the impact of my own actions, because my ultimate goal is I want people to change. And if I want people to change, attacking isn't necessarily the way that I'm going to achieve that, because if you say the word racist, people just close the door and they won't hear a thing you say. So I'm trying to find different ways to encourage the dialogue.
Yeah. And that's some such practical guidance there on what you do as a CEO, and as an individual to call out and support racism. And actually, this just goes to show that even when you need allies like myself, actually you can learn something, because my husband's been sent 2 racist jokes in the past 2 weeks, which you would kind of imagine as a mixed race wife that might not happen, but clearly it does. And actually, between us, we didn't know how to handle it, because actually I'm immediately fuming, as you say. I'm aggressive. It wasn't even sent to me, and between my husband and I, we were trying to talk it out, and you just don't know. So even, you're actually taking practical advice like that. I'm like, actually, now I can educate my husband on how to be a good ally to me, because he can have that objectivity in those conversations that, to be honest, I can't and I won't ever. So yeah, thank you, first of all. And it just goes to show, I guess, how much we can all learn from these podcasts. And that's something that neither of you mentioned, that talking about allyship can be a bit of a vulnerable subject. And the fact that you're on this podcast, willing to talk about your experiences and where you're at and what you want to do, I think should be called out in itself as really part of your proactivity in wanting to be a brilliant ally to the community. So
100%.
Thanks, Jo. Thank you. Thanks a lot. And that means a lot to me, because you kind of think you're doing the right things, and whilst you're human, knowing what's right and wrong, instinct kicks in. This is a challenge we face, and knowing what the right thing is to do is helpful for everybody, I feel.
Yeah, agree. Couldn't agree more.
That was an interesting point you made, Julie, about Belton just saying about repeating that. You see, because I've been in that situation, I don't know how to handle it. And it's, I've lived by the kind of, if you see, if it's wrong, you call it out kind of thing. Do you know what I mean? Because that's the way that I've always operated. And perhaps I haven't been doing it right. Do you know what I mean? Because if someone, I just, I can't stand it. So it's just like, if it's wrong, it doesn't matter what, I'll call it out, and I'll just, what you doing, what you saying, that kind of thing. Are there right ways and wrong ways of doing these things? And it's like, even if we talk about business and work, and it's like the recruitment process, I'm really kind of quite passionate about that, because as you said, right, you can't be what you can't see. And I find a lot of organizations hire in their own image, right? So you've got leaders that have been in business a long time, and it's not conscious. It's unconscious, but you get a plethora of diverse individuals coming into an organization from multitudes of backgrounds, and it doesn't matter. But I see lots of organizations kind of hiring like me.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
look like me.
They look like
That's,
me.
I know that's
They've
good.
got a shirt. There's a shirt. I wear a suit. I've got a shirt and a tie, and we got the guys from Jill from Microsoft. And when I was working at Microsoft, come as you are, do as you do. That was one of the key things that I always talk about, and I'd love to see more of that adopted across all businesses and everything, and that acceptance and people's understanding of what that difference is, and really appreciating it from an allyship perspective and becoming allies because they appreciate the difference. I still fundamentally think that some organizations unconsciously hire in their own image.
I agree, actually. And I feel like we're all going to find this story quite horrifying, but it's probably quite a nice segue into how we take allyship from you as individuals and leaders in your businesses. It's brilliant that you're making change, but actually, how do we permeate that down? How do what can you do as organisations actually become better allies? Because to your point of hiring, Jez, I've got such a profound memory of some person talking to me once about some mentoring program that he was part of, and he was actually doing some CV checking with, let's say, 16-year-old young girls from a really inner city school. And he was talking to me really passionately around how I'd helped her, I'd really improved their CV. We were then having a conversation around interview techniques. And she came from a Muslim background, and, and as such, her name reflected that. And his honest advice to her was to change her name so that it could be pronounced better, so that she would have more chance of getting an interview because people would be able to say her name. And this was a person who was talking to me as an alleged ally in the business, talking about how he's flowing that advice down. And actually, that is where it goes from being the individual having an impact, which in that case is clearly terrible, but actually this person thinks they're an ally. I can tell by the way he's talking to me, he thinks he's an ally, and he couldn't be further from it. So it'd be really good to get your views on how do you make that part of the culture of allyship in your organisations as opposed to an individual actions that you take, because I'm sure that in either of the businesses that you're in, if you heard that conversation, there'd be something seriously wrong going on that you wouldn't approve of. So how do you make sure that the allyship is part and parcel of what your orgs do rather than just what you as leaders do? Julie?
Gosh, that's such a great question. I mean, I'm so, as you say, the story is shocking, and there are so many things like that make me ashamed to be white at times, to be honest with you. How dare someone think someone should change their name? So I've always felt that people choose to work for ResourceiT. So in my organisation, I've always been grateful that people want to be there. It's a very different culture in my business. People choose to work there, people choose to give their time, people choose to be part of the organisation and make the contribution. And so we have a very strong, inclusive culture. What I'm trying to do is harness that culture and use our connections and our network, given the amount of IT organizations we work with, huge companies like Microsoft and Protiviti and others, use our connections to encourage other businesses to listen, educate, change. So for us, I feel that, as I said at the start of this conversation, I'm making some intentional changes myself about our recruitment policies, about how we promote people of colour within our business so that other people of colour will apply and feel welcome and included. But I'm also using our position of influence to reach out to our partners and our customers within the IT industry, promoting T-Care, talking to them about allyship, and within the leadership dialogue that I have. So because I'm a CEO and I'm connected to other CEOs, I'm finding that one of the best things I can do is to keep talking to my peers about what I've learned and the impact it's had, for the two reasons of it's the right thing to do as a human being, but also it makes bloody good commercial sense to be an inclusive organisation. So I think in terms of the that, you know, when you spoke about the person that was supposed to be the ally having that conversation with you, part of my education that I've learned about the difference between performative allyship and meaningful allyship. You know, people say that they're allies. They'll make a comment, they'll like a LinkedIn post, they'll place a picture of solidarity or something, and they actually expect that people should be grateful for their efforts because they've made a comment or something. They're not actually doing anything. They just think it's the right thing to do, and there's a lot of that in our industry. That we do a lot of things because it's certainly seen as the right thing to do. Being meaningful as an ally is another thing altogether. And to be a proper ally, your words and your actions have to be in sync and actually work together. So if all you do is talk about it and you don't actually do anything, then in some ways you're just self-serving and causing more damage. So that's really what I'm trying to do, is to talk, to be educated, to talk about what I've learned, to make intentional change, and then to try and influence others to make change.
Just for the sake of listeners, I know you've given examples there, but could you maybe clearly define the performative ally versus someone who's, and I don't want to use the word actual, I think that's the wrong word, but someone who's more of an ally in the situation, because I think that'd be quite interesting for our listeners.
So do you mean, Alex, for me to define what I think is the difference between performative and meaningful in terms of the two different types of allyship? So for me, as I have been educating myself, what I've learned is that there are two types of allyship: performative allyship and meaningful allyship. Performative allyship isn't actually helping underrepresented communities. So what that means is it's actually where you're looking for reward for being viewed as, oh, she's a good girl or he's a good bloke. Doing the right thing, saying the right thing, making a comment on LinkedIn, putting a post, all kind of trying to just fit in and expecting people to say, hey, high five to you. That was a great post that you put up, but not actually taking any action. So performative allyship is about being seen to be doing something because that's what everybody seems to be doing. It's almost like being trendy. That it's just a trend. It isn't anything. Meaningful allyship.
Activity.
Yeah. Meaningful allyship is about taking action. So if we say something, then we need to do something about it. Otherwise, it has no impact. So we can't just hope for things to be better. We have to do. Hope doesn't create change. So for me, what I've understood, meaningful allyship, sponsorship, exactly. Sponsorship, intervention, change, stepping up, using your voice, challenging, learning, and being active in any way you can. Does that answer your question, Alex?
Yeah, no, that does. And I kind of wanted to pose that back to Jez, because I know he said that his understanding of allyship isn't as advanced as he would like it to be. But hearing that term and hearing that described, can you sort of envision your workplace and see where a lot of people fit into those two categories, and sort of how do you feel about yourself? You don't have to answer this question if it's quite personal, but how do you feel about where you think you sit within that?
I've lived those values ever since I was a kid, quite frankly. Growing up with my two best friends were black guys. Grew up with them, still friends with them now, played foot with them for years. So it was always been, it was unconscious back then. Do you know what I mean? I didn't think about labels back then when you're growing up, and it was only in latter years when you start maturing that society throws labels at people, and you start thinking, what am I supposed to do now? This isn't great. This isn't wrong. This is wrong. This is the wrong thing. But I've always for me, it's always been about, you have to. Julie summed it up. You have to take action. You've got to live your values, and those values mean work. They mean home. They mean everything. And you have to take actions based on that. And I have seen lots of individuals and people who are, to your point, there's everyone's saying the right thing and creating the right image, but are you actually taking any action here? I'm sure you've got all the likes that you want and all of that kind of stuff, but what are you actually doing? And it's not that I'm not looking for me. It's not about thank yous or praise or anything like that. It's just about, it's how you live your life and how you actually expect everyone else to live their life around them. It's not about anything else but that. I think you have to kind of really search your soul to understand that really, are you doing everything that you should be doing, and are you really behaving the way that is right?
Yeah, and and I think the whole point of this podcast, right, is I think I'm a good ally. Am I? And part of that, I think, is taking action and ownership of your learning and your progression, and your understanding what's a challenge. But I always think a bit of feedback is always nice, in terms of, as you mentioned earlier, am I doing the right thing? Yeah. Should I say that? And actually hearing some examples of where it has helped someone in the community. So not to put you on the spot, Alex, but I guess, to ask the host, I mean, have you got any examples where actually you have been on the receiving end of some really good allyship that you could share?
So I'm trying to rack my brain for...
Well, that says a lot if you've got to rack your brain, Alex. I don't like the sound of that.
No, it just... No, and I can be honest, right? It's not something that I see frequently. I don't really come into the workplace and feel like, oh, okay, this person's actively supporting my view. They may be sort of aware of the situation, or they might have an understanding, but it's not really, they don't really step in and take action. However, there was a time when I was quite early on in my career within the tech industry, and there was a particular person who, at first, I kind of took it as, oh, I'm quite young, this person's quite senior in terms of the amount of time that they've been working within the industry. Maybe they're just trying to sort of parent me and mentor me and guide me in a certain situation. But it wasn't until other things started to happen, and it was them that was calling it out and saying, what this person's doing to you is wrong, how they're speaking to you is incorrect. You need, do you understand that it could be because of X, Y, Z? And they sat me down and had these conversations, and because I was quite young and I'm trying to prove myself and sort of show that I am of value, I wasn't really paying attention to those types of things that were going on. But I think since then, every time, and I'm happy to speak about this person more offline because I don't really want to stick them in it here, but anytime I've had an opportunity to mention someone who's been helpful to my career, I always refer back to this person. And yeah, I think especially where I've had my ups and downs within the industry. In fact, I left and went to work for a publication, then came back. My experience with that person has always stuck with me. And I think what was key was that it was before sort of this allyship term was coined. It was more at a time where I think it was just, they were just a good person. Yeah. And you could tell that they were just a good person. And what that made me feel is that anytime I saw that person doing something, you wanted them to succeed, you wanted them to help. So this kind of ties into what you were saying, Jez, about it's kind of your nature to help or point out when something is wrong or anything like that. And I guess that goes in line with the successes that you've had in your career, to the point that you're now quite a senior leader within your business. So it can go hand in hand at certain times.
Yeah,
but that's probably the best example I've got.
And that is such a nice example. And thank you for sharing, Alex, in that, sometimes we can think that allyship is, you have to make all of these grand gestures and, you have to be doing all these trainings and all of that is great. But fundamentally, in the heat of the moment, are you sitting there and are you supporting someone, whether they know that they need it or not? Because in that example, and especially sometimes when you are younger in the career, as you say, you've got so many pressures, to do well, to be seen well. We're covering, which, we spoke about in previous podcasts, so please go and take a look. But for someone to be the person to say, you don't have to accept this, that is not okay, is exactly the kind of allyship that we need. And yeah, just thank you for sharing, and yeah, hats off to whoever that person is that supported you. But yeah,
can I just
Jez, go on,
come
sorry.
back to Alex on that one? And I think that
Jez, can you lean forward?
I think, yeah, sorry guys. I think it's a really important point you made there, and I don't think you can underestimate my learnings as I've got not older, in this industry.
The word is wise.
I wish. That's a good word, but I don't consider myself wise. It's what I do, and I'm sure everyone does it here. And they, a little bit of talk, taking time to talk to people. Some people call it mentoring, some people call it anything, but actually, it's giving your time to people. I do a lot of that now, and one that's a regret of mine that I didn't do enough of it as I was coming up, if that makes sense, because you're striving to get to the top. You're looking at your career and stuff like that, and you actually, on that journey, sometimes you can have a massive impact on people by just giving them time, and that individual gave you time, right, to help you understand the situation you were in. And I think that's beholden on everyone, really, to start understanding how they can give their time to help other people and individuals coming into our industry to make it, to climb, not just climb the ladder, but to understand that they're in a very supportive environment, so they can learn the lessons. I pass on all of the stuff that I got very wrong. All of those mistakes that I made. I just don't want other people to go through the same things that I went through. So, all those individuals like that worked with you, Alex, those little things make such a massive difference, because you're talking about it today, and that person probably can't even remember they had that conversation with you.
Yeah,
but it has a significant impact on the rest of your working career.
I wanted to say something about something Jez raised, which is growing up with not really seeing that there was a problem. I wanted to talk about that a bit more, because I think that's one of the things that it's wrong to say I'm shocked, because that would be a ridiculous thing to say. I was born in 1967. I grew up in the 70s. TV was, some of the TV we used to watch was unbelievable. Some of the sitcoms and things that we saw, sexism, racism, I mean, you name it, we grew up with it, and it was humor back then. When I was a very small, almost baby, my parents were in the forces, and we lived next door to a black family, and they had a daughter who was the same age as me. And she and I, at 1 year old, used to bath together. That mum used to put me in her pajamas. I used to put her in my pajamas, and they'd pass me over the fence. And it was completely invisible to me as a child. My first boyfriend was mixed race. And I remember walking down the street with him when I was 16, holding hands and saying to him, "Why is everyone staring at you?" And he's saying to me, "They're not staring at me, they're staring at us." Why are they staring at us? Because I was a white girl with a mixed race boyfriend, and I was really like, what? Why? I just really didn't understand, and I feel really strongly about that there's a lack of awareness still, believe it or not, that there's a problem, and that goes for any minority, like the women in technology thing, which I know I've mentioned a couple of times. People going, well, why is there? We're not still going on about that, are we? Yes, we are, because it's not fixed. Just as we're talking about being allies.
I think it's such an interesting point you raised, Julie, because actually at the weekend of my mum, I think that in the 70s and 80s, to be an ally, there was a lot of colour blindness. in that it was to not be racist, and absolutely people weren't. It would be like, well, we don't care, we don't matter, I'm me, you're you, we're all together and we're a collective. And I just think it's an evolution, isn't it, that today colour blindness is that's okay, but it's not no, I want you to respect what I do bring, actually, rather than just you being okay with my colour. I want you to know
That's
what
right.
my heritage is, what my culture
That's
is,
exactly
and
what I
actually all the
mean.
good things that come with it. So yeah, it's a really interesting kind of, you can almost look back through time, can't you, and see that moments of where we've grown up to the issues of race effectively.
Yeah.
And and with that we've started to think about it differently, which is I think what makes some of your experiences really interesting. Let's say equally, my mum, she was adopted, so, and her adoptive family were white, and her mum was like, we're all the same. So to an extent, yeah, there was colour blindness there, even with my mum in her own family. So yeah, really
So do you
topic.
think colour blindness is as bad as is it as serious? I guess it isn't. I guess I'm going to answer my own question. It's not as serious as racism, but it's not as great as allyship.
Yeah, personal opinion, and Alex, I'd love your view in a second as well. Yes, the way that you've described it, is colour blindness racist effectively?
Yeah.
No. Do I think it's completely inclusive and respectful of actually what your colour represents? No. That's where I think actually when you go beyond that into being a true ally, that's when you step up a gear. So my personal opinion on this, I really don't think there's any right or wrong to it. As I said, Alex, I'd love to know your view, but yeah, that's mine.
Yeah, thanks.
I was thinking, I'm trying to think of the interpretation of what you said. So it's colour blindness versus allyship, right?
Colour blindness versus racism, really. My feel is colour blindness the same as racism or akin to racism? And is one worse than the other, or how? Because it's just understanding that from anybody that I can have a conversation with, whether they're white or black. Just understanding people's views is really important to me. It's part of my education.
Yeah. So when you say colour blindness, I think of the stereotypical comment that people make, which is that I don't see colour. Oh, I just see everyone as everyone. And I just don't think that just doesn't work, because if you take that same feces and you plant it onto religion, for example, and you say, oh, I don't see any religion, everyone is, oh, I don't see specific religions, I only see everyone as one, it kind of shows that you're not aware of their identity, because everyone's background has a different story to it, whether you're black or Asian or from whatever part of the world you're from. There's always going to be a story for you, and if you're sort of separating it and trying to say, well, I'm treating people equally, or well, not equally, or you see people as being similar, regardless of those backgrounds, then you're kind of you're missing an opportunity to really educate yourself on that person's background, so that next time you meet someone who's from a similar ilk, you can then say, oh, okay, I understand that potentially your background may be like this because of this person I've met before, and so on and so forth. And then over time you start to understand, okay, this person is, let's say, from Eritrea and Muslim. Oh, I've met a few people from there, and I understand these are the certain parts of their culture, etc., etc. And then that's where you can start coupling that up into the workplace as well.
Yeah.
That seems like I'm kind of waffled there, but did that sort of make sense?
So I'm conscious of time, but I just want to ask you another question then, because this is really important to me. So with what you've both said there then, so I could have a conversation with a black person, and what I don't want to be seen as disinterested. So being colourblind is almost being disinterested, I feel. And so then I want to talk to someone, and the questions I've heard, or other people that have asked me this question, and I'm interested in your perspective. Where are you from? And you might say Hounslow. And the white person might say, no, where are you really from? Like, what are you asking me? Are you asking me about my heritage, my family, my background? Are you asking me about my grandparents, why my skin is the color it is? What are you actually asking me? What would be your advice to a non-marginalized person in terms of, one, not being colorblind and acknowledge someone's ethnicity and their culture and taking that on board, but two, not being disrespectful or rude, frankly, about asking the question and being interested in their culture and heritage? How would you recommend
So,
having that
so
conversation?
Julie, if I was to throw that at you, I think you answered it in actually the way that you asked it, because the moment that someone says, where are you from, I immediately get stressed. When they say, where are you from, they say Essex, and they say, oh cool, I'm from Surrey. I'm like, great, you're hearing what I'm saying to you. I'm from Essex, and
Yeah,
irrespective of what I look like, that's where I come
yeah,
from. It's the moment someone asks it twice, because I can almost
100%.
guarantee that
yeah.
Jez
That's
and
exactly what I
Julie,
mean.
actually, it'd be good to hear your view. But if you went to someone asked you, Julie, where you were from, and you went, oh, I'm from Surrey. They went, no, you're really from. You're like, I'm from Surrey. Like, it's a really confrontational way, and you know exactly the meaning. You know exactly
Yeah,
what they mean. The moment
yeah,
someone says it again, I'm like, okay, I see where this is going. That's what my brain thinks.
yeah,
So it's a really great question, but it comes with the intent. It doesn't really matter who you say it to, no matter what they look like. But if they say they're from Essex or Wales or Zimbabwe or, the North Pole, doesn't really matter. But you should be taking their answer rather than going, what I'm
get
seeing
it.
versus what I'm hearing. No,
Thanks.
you're not.
I get
Does that
it.
make sense?
And it totally does. And that's what I thought was the right answer. As you say, you ask the question, you get the answer, and that's what you accept. If someone says, oh, I'm from Essex, but my family are from Nigeria, that's what they want to share. That's what they want to say. That's up to them. And you accept the answer. So I think that's a really important educational point for people that say they want to be better allies.
Yeah.
Alternatively as well, right? Because I kind of had a little chuckle to myself, because when you asked the question, I was like, I've definitely been in that situation numerous occasions. It's just about, and I mean, Joe kind of touched upon it already. It's funny because production in the background have said me too. But it's funny because Joe touched upon it there, saying it's about, if you relay the same question again, it's quite frustrating. You can always ask that question, and then if you haven't got the answers that you want, you can always ask them about, try and be more specific, for example. So what's your heritage, or where are your parents from, or did your parents grow up here? You can always develop that conversation as well, so that you avoid sort of the double barrel shotgun of the same question, and then all of a sudden that person on the other end is just going to judge you. They judge you automatically. And I'll give you an example. So Cricket World Cup, when England were in the final and it went into like overtime for the first time ever, I ran into a bar which was near where I lived in Hammersmith, because I was just coming off a train following it on my phone. Also, I'm not a cricket fan. It seemed like a historic moment. And this Australian guy starts talking to me, and that same questioning is what happened with me. He was like, where are you from? And I was like, well, I live round the corner, and I grew up basically in East London. And he was like, no, where are you actually from? And then straight away you're like, right, I haven't got time for this person. Yeah. Like, they're not trying to be sort of, you could just tell already, you're like, you don't really want to be in that conversation. And that would be my concern to anyone who's trying to be an ally, because you will get judged off of just that one conversation that you've had, and we'll carry it. And if we ever come into contact with you again, we'll be like, well, we know that this person's kind of like this.
Yeah.
That's great. Great
I like
advice.
I like this Q&A format.
It was.
Yeah, I mean, this is a really important subject. We're here to educate. We're here to help people to learn, and this is asking some of these questions and us being in an open and transparent conversation, feeling comfortable to have this dialogue, is exactly one of the big things that TCare can bring to the technology community. And I hope that people listening to this podcast will gain some value from this conversation, because some of these things in the past, and to Jez's point, when I was younger, I may have been not confident enough to talk about or to ask. And
That's the thing.
to be able to ask these questions respectfully and with real intent to learn, without, as you know, the one of my education pieces was around, it's not up to people of color to educate white people about how to be a good ally. It's up to you to educate yourself. That doesn't mean that you can't have an
Yeah.
intelligent conversation and
Yeah.
ask people how they would prefer to be communicated with, even like with this. So where are you from? I'm from Essex. Oh, sorry, I'm on a journey to be a better ally, and I'm really making a conscious effort not to be colorblind and to show interest in everybody, their culture, their heritage, their interests, and so on. I was just really interested in terms of your culture and your heritage. That's why kind of I asked the question. Oh, okay. Is that a better way, do you think, for people to open up and because the question isn't about your skin color is different to mine, therefore I'm being racist with that question. Actually, I'm showing an interest in where you are from and an interest in you as a human being. Is that a better way to
Does
have the
Yeah,
conversation?
absolutely.
I'm interested. Does that feel like the right question to ask? Why I say that, because at our recent TCare dinner, I was on a table and one of the guys we had exactly this same conversation, and he was really kind of quite clear that he wants to tell people about his ethnicity,
Mm.
Yeah.
because he thinks across the marginalised arena, there's different ethnicities, and he's proud of his ethnicity. There's West African, there's Caribbean, there's South Asian, there's Bengali, there's Indian, there's people from Pakistan, and he wants, he's saying that, I want you to understand actually where I am from.
Yeah.
So it's
And
that
actually,
ethnicity.
that I think that's really, really important and really true. Like, people are proud, and they should be. No matter where you're from.
Correct.
I think it's people like to share their heritage, and something that we do in the Microsoft ERG, which is our employee resource group, is we give people the opportunity to speak about their heritage and what it means for them, their families, their religion, their celebration activities, and and all of the different things that come with that. And it's super interesting because one, it's interesting, it just is, by its very nature. But two, it's also these things that bring you closer to your colleagues and people, and understand why different periods of different times are really important to them, and how we could be respectful when those things happen, right? It's not just about Christmas, is it? It's about all of the other religious festivals that happen, for example, but do we treat it in the same way? So I think we've covered a lot of topics today. Really interesting discussion, and thank you, Julie and Jez, for helping Alex and I navigate and ask some of the questions that as an ally you should be able to ask. And yeah, I think what we've shown is that there isn't a right answer, and actually, depending on who you're speaking to, they might give you something different, because my experiences undoubtedly are different from Alex's. Alex's are undoubtedly different from our producers, who's having a lovely conversation with us in the background. So, I'm glad that we've been able to share and show the diversity in what is a diverse topic, for sure.
Yeah, and yeah, thank you for your time, guys. Honestly, it's been helpful, and it's really nice having people who are at different parts of their journey in terms of understanding allyship, and also just taking that on board as well, and making sure that they are playing their part within their business to be a beacon, and set that example for others within the workplace as well, to say this is what we're trying to achieve as a business. So yeah, no, thank you guys. It's upset that we've run out of time because it's been really good, a really great conversation. I think this is definitely a topic that we'll cover again within the podcast series, because there is a lot to unearth in here, and we've got different perspectives to talk about as well. You've got to talk from the perspective of the ally and those who are receiving that support from the ally as well, and we've kind of touched upon that in some aspects within this dialogue today.
I was going to say, I think what Julie brought up at the start of it, ally is quite a frightening word. So we want people to embrace it rather than actually fear, oh my God, what do I need to do now?
Yeah, exactly.
Educate yourself. That's the key thing. That's the absolute closing message. Educate yourself. challenge your prejudices and your own discomfort. Practice and learn and take action to change. And join TCare. That's one of the big things.
Well, yeah, that's exactly what I did.
Any last messages from yourself, Jeremy?
No, I think just to echo what Julie said, stand up, take action, and live the values, right? Live your values at work, at home, it doesn't matter. Live the values.
I realised there that I said Jeremy, and we had two Jeremies. That was glorious.
That was always going to happen. We got all the way through.
Yeah. Joe, any last comments from yourself?
No, I think just thank you for all of you for your honesty and your vulnerability. This can be a really scary and a really daunting conversation, and I think it's conversations and insights like you've shown from an individual, a personal, a company perspective that help us to have more of them. So yeah, I'm sure I've no doubt we'll be calling you both back at some point. So yeah, you made a rod for your own back, but hopefully for good reason.
Thanks, guys.
It's all about the learning. Thanks so much. Thank you.
No worries, that's fine. So follow us on all the socials. Please like, share, subscribe to our content as well. We want to share the message not just within our industry, but we want to try and go beyond that and make sure that everyone is sort of trying to learn around this term, which is relatively new to a lot of people. But apart from that, tune in next time to our next episode, and yeah, we're looking forward to having you join us again. So take care.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Catch you later.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we look forward to hearing your thoughts. So please continue the dialogue on socials. To stay updated on when we release the next episode, follow us on LinkedIn and on Twitter at TC4RE. And don't forget to check our website at www.tcare.org for more information and content on today's topics.